So the final hearing, deciding whether your guns are returned or retained. So the initial hearing kept your guns from being returned immediately. Now comes the most important court date, the final hearing to decide the fate. What's going to happen here? Just kind of a little rehash, right? The police, they filed the sworn affidavit and the judge then had to review it. They said a hearing within 14 days. And at that hearing, the state had to determine that there was probable cause. Person whose guns were being retained, they're dangerous. And let's say the court established that because probable cause is a relatively low standard. So what happens next? Well, the court will set a final retention hearing. And this occurs after that initial hearing, which is the post-seizure retention hearing. So what is the purpose of this hearing? Well, the court is going to make a definitive decision on whether or not the individual is dangerous and on whether or not the firearm should be retained long-term or returned. The state bears the burden of proof again. Every time the state is going to bear the burden of proof because they are the petitioner at this hearing. They're asking for the guns to be retained. They must prove by clear and convincing evidence that the individual is dangerous. So again, we talked about in another video, this is going to be a higher standard than probable causes. Why is it clear and convincing? Why is it a higher standard? Well, the reason it's a higher standard is because this is the hearing that's going to determine more on the long-term basis, or at least on a longer temporary basis, that your firearms will be retained or won't be retained. What's clear and convincing evidence is a firm belief. We don't often talk in percentages. I can't say, oh, it's 70%, it's 75%. It's a firm belief that evidence instills towards conviction. We get to this hearing. What are your rights? Well, your rights are fairly similar to what they were at the initial retention hearing. And that is you have the right to be noticed. You're going to be given this court date at the last hearing that you were at, right? You have an opportunity to be heard and present evidence again, similar to the last hearing. And you have the right to be represented by an attorney at this hearing. When you have the right to be represented by an attorney at the hearing, that means one could be appointed too. You could ask for one. So what can the evidence include? Well, the evidence can include almost anything that could be relevant. There could be witness testimony from police officers, family, friends, experts. There could be documents, the affidavits, reports. There could potentially be body cam footage. All of these things could be evidence that could either help your case or hurt your case. Depends on what are these people going to say? Did friends hear you threatening someone? Did family members going to say you're dangerous or not? What did the police hear? What did the police see? And then the court's decision is going to be based on this evidence. The judge is going to rule on whether or not the state met its burden, that there is clear and convincing evidence that establishes that the individual is dangerous and therefore their firearms need to be retained on a longer level. And those are the outcomes. And if the state meets its burden, the court's going to order the retention. If the state doesn't meet its burden, then again, the court has to order those firearms are returned to you. So if you have any questions about what this hearing would look like, the final retention hearing, don't hesitate to ask us. We deal with red flag cases all the time at the Marc Lopez law firm. You can give us a call, 317-632-3642. And remember, always plead the fifth.